Hello, Internet! Gino, that Pinguino Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and it is time to continue our trip. It's time to get back to basics. Again, for the second
Keep with
time.
the brand, man.
It's time to get back to basics for a second time with Final Fantasy I, and I am joined, as always, on these Final Fantasy adventures with Chris ZombiePie Redacted.
Hey, everybody. So, Gino, I want you to do something for me. I've got a little trick up my sleeve. I'm bringing back an old podcast skit. I want you to close your eyes. Close your eyes.
Okay.
Close your eyes, because I think the sound will give away what we're going to do here.
Are you opening Final Fantasy trading cards?
Nope. I just opened up a can of Vienna Sausages.
Oh, no. Why'd you do that?
No.
One of the emails I got from Alex doesn't want to have their Giant Bomb username read because they don't want their name to be associated.
Should I announce who the other...
They pointed out is that they feel like I'm mispronouncing Final Fantasy names and terminology all the time. So the thing is that whenever I pronounce something wrong, I'm going to eat a Vienna sausage.
I haven't even announced all the people on the show, and you've already ruined it.
Okay, so this is going to be a pain train of epic proportions.
You're doing this to you.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to eat all these sausages before the podcast ends. But introduce our special guest.
We're also joined by special guest Jeff Rud. Hello.
Hi.
Jeff
Hi.
Rud.
Good morning.
Rud. I got it right. Good.
There's the whole story, but anyway.
The Internet's Jeff Rud. Where would people know you from, Jeff, in case they didn't listen to the first epised?
You know, I mispronounced Jeff Rud's last name, so I'm going to eat a sausage.
Fuck.
You're a disgusting man. Former audio engineer and editor for Hardcore Gaming 101. Currently a...
Stop chewing into the microphone.
Jesus, terrible. I'm currently working on a thing called the Nan Compendium, which is basically an effort to touch up all the... Stealing my thunder with your Vienna Sausages, boy. Touching up the Namco entries on the Giant Bomb Wiki and trying to do some sort of light blog-ish coverage of basically all those games, including all their ports. I just touched off of King and Balloon and Tank Battalion last week, which are basically the 9th and 10th Namco games ever made.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
They're not great.
It's weird to see a company strike the iron while it's hot with Pac-Man and then follow it up with two kind of trashy arcade games that are just rips of their previous wheelhouse.
Yeah. On the other hand, it's kind of neat to see them basically, to borrow like very lazily from Native American parlance, use the whole buffalo on these old arcade boards that they had laying around, because like basically they had to develop new like hardware to make Pac-Man go. So what they did after that was basically repurpose old shit. And for King and Balloon, all they did was add a digital audio processor on it so they could have like some very crude voice samples in it. But yeah, they're interesting games. But I would not recommend... Let me put it this way. King and Balloon actually got like put onto some of their later Namco Museum compilations, and Tank Battalion did not. And there's a reason for that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, today we are back in Final Fantasy I land. Original NES or PS1 or... Game Boy Advance.
Wonder Swan.
Or Wonder Swan. We've got... I was playing on the PS1 version. Jeff, you were playing on the Wonder Swan version.
I'm actually doing the same version as you. Just PS1 on a Vita.
I played the GBA version on an emulator, which... The fucking GBA emulation's not where it needs to be. Nope. It probably never will.
I really enjoyed when you apparently found a glitch that let you play it.
Oh, yeah, this is awesome. So, Jeff Rud, did I tell you about the glitch I encountered with my emulator?
I'm not sure.
I found out that if you disable or turn off sound, it plays the game at 60 frames per second.
That's faster than a GBA natively plays games.
Yes, so that made finishing Final Fantasy I baller.
Nice.
I played almost all of the game mute, which is not optimal because the soundtrack is one of the few things that is continually kind of awesome about Final Fantasy 1. But if it means I was able to play the game faster than I should, then I'm going to take advantage of that every single time.
Yeah.
It saved the frames and gave them back to you.
Yeah, that's a weird thing. Like, I was thinking of filing a bug report to the creators of the Visual Boy Advance, but then, nah, I had to finish Final Fantasy 1 before they fixed that.
Yeah, I needed to exploit this gap.
It's just on the top of the emulator where it displays kind of the percentage in terms of what percentage the game is outputting in. It was pretty funny to see at times the game outputting at 300+%.
That's amazing. That's a lot faster than it should be.
Yes.
Okay.
There were times where it was 120 frames per second, which made the game almost unplayable.
Great. Well, we got some feedback that I felt we should read. We got a lot of feedback, actually.
Yeah, actually, so
episode.
Jeff Rud, if you didn't see, the blog version of the Final Fantasy 1 podcast it was the most successful blog version of the Deep Listens podcast in podcast history.
It's up there, yeah.
I waded into the Giant Bomb entry of it and saw there was quite a thread in there. But
yes, so I'll start off. Remember, if you want to get in touch with the show, you can do so at Deep Listens Pod or at That Pinguino on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. You can hit up our comment sections or deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. And you could sound something like this. Here, this is from Joe, and he said he wants to chime in the talk about the differences between Final Fantasy 1 Origins versions and Dawn of Souls version. While playing the game with MP does sound nice, it really trivializes the game. The D&D style... MP as in magic points.
Yeah.
The D&D style magic rules add a cool survival element to dungeon diving in the game. It really separated it from Dragon Quest and the plethora of Dragon Quest clones at the time of its release. The system isn't implemented as well as it could be, and it's always been something that I wanted Final Fantasy to revisit. I like that Origins allows players to choose, but I think it really stinks that there's no convenient way to play the Origins version of Final Fantasy 1, as they also took the original difficulty option out of both the PSP and mobile ports. I hate to be the person that pins a game's worth on its difficulty, but without it, FF1 is just a worse version of Dragon Quest III.
I kind of agree, to be honest. I think of the fun you can have that I have had, and I guess I'm a specific type of person. Some of the most fun I've had is trying to basically use the spell system as efficiently as possible. So by the end of the game, you can like throw off like Nuke and Lightning 3 and Blizzard 3 and like these really like efficient, powerful spells for like cutting through mobs and cutting down like bosses and stuff. But you only get so many of those, whereas by the end of the game, you've got like 8 or 9 casts of Blink and, Haste and these spells that you would kind of otherwise just ignore. And it turns out they actually retain a lot of utility throughout the game. So when you're going through a dungeon and you have no way to regain spells once they have been cast out of your pool, you're kind of forced to prioritize, like, okay, well, do I use Lightning 2 or Lightning 3 here? And we'll get into, there are items in this game that basically give you infinite casts of some of these spells, which kind of changes the game a little bit as well.
Breaks the magic system.
To an extent, they become a little less useful when you're using the damage ones, but the effect ones, the buff and debuff ones, retain quite a bit of their usefulness right through the final dungeon. So I agree. Yes.
Yeah.
And as someone whose first impressions of Final Fantasy 1 was Dawn of Souls, I have to say that I also agree, because I got so little out of the game narratively speaking that by playing this game just with MP, I felt like I was missing something. Not just like mechanically, but it's so dry and bare bones when it is an MPHP classic, select the attack from the attack menu and use whichever spells that you have at your disposal using your pool of MP. The fact that I didn't really have to strategize, and the fact that you can exploit the gil and have just an endless supply of gil. By the time I reached the last, I would say, hour of the game, I always had like 99 ethers. And that basically broke my investment in like strategizing the use of magic whenever I was in a confrontation where magic would have played a critical role in determining the outcome of my battles. And so because it got very little in terms of like the narrative and the story, the fact there wasn't really all that much to the very bare bones and dry classic JRPG gameplay, it felt sterile in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's a shame because I think that the Origins, it's a big trade-off. Like playing with the magic pool, I think that the white magic specifically, some of the early spells just don't do anything anymore when you get further into the game. Like having 9 uses of cure is the equivalent of having 9 potions, except you can carry 99 potions, and you can only ever have, I think, 9 casts of the first cure spell. So it's basically like having 9 extra slots of some of the worst items in the game, which isn't that useful. I only use them in case of emergency. I never felt like conserving them. It was just a matter of which menu was closer. Whereas some of the other spells that are mid-tier, you start making interesting decisions. Like, do I want to use Lightning 2? Or I think there's, in the second tier of Black Magic, there's a buff spell that shares a tier with, I think, some of the crowd control spells. And the buff spell is useful in boss fights, and then the crowd control spell is useful against mobs. So every time I faced a mob, I had to do a little internal math. Do I think I'm going to run into so many mobs that I won't have enough spell casts left by the time I reach a boss? Or do I need to just suck it up and deal with this mob? Because the boss is coming.
It's coming.
It's always coming. So, yeah, I agree. I think that, especially since this game is so simple, having that additional kind of cantrip style, or not cantrip, D&D style magic, added something to a game that otherwise doesn't have a lot going on. So
the
now,
classical name is Vancian style for those curious, from Jack Vance's The Dying Earth series.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Well, from that intelligent comment to some YouTube comments.
Oh boy!
Let's jump to some quick hitters. Jon Snow says Final Fantasy IX Chocobo minigame is the best. Great point. Accurate.
Bullshit.
Fireheart47 says, is that guy always so fucking negative? I believe referring to ZP on, again, a Final Fantasy IX podcast. And the answer is yes. Now from there, let's jump to some other comments.
I don't feel good.
I told you not to do that. I always tell you not to have Vienna sausages.
I might drink the juice if I eat all the sausages.
Don't.
No.
Stop giving yourself food poisoning. Stop it.
Okay. Well, next comment.
Next comment. This comes from Slag on GiantBomb.com. I'm gonna jump around here because his comment was amazing and really long and in depth, and tried to give context to Final Fantasy I's success. And it was a really in-depth thing. Reading it would take a while. So, really enjoyed hearing your crew's thoughts on Final Fantasy I. As someone who played the game on launch day in the US back in the day, it's interesting to see how people perceive it coming to it so far later. Not surprised you guys weren't as thrilled with it, and I think that's totally fair for a lot of reasons. I'm also really glad you guys brought on Jeff Rud to give some context, because in this case, it adds a ton to explain why it's one of the formative games in gaming culture. Context of this game's release is everything to why this game was significant. If you don't mind, I'd like to share what it was like for me back in 1990 and why I think Final Fantasy I's success is the expected outcome once you take what gaming was like back then into account. Gaming in the world itself in the late 80s, early 90s was very different compared to now, even compared to a scant 7 years later when Final Fantasy VII hit stateside. The most important factor to consider is that gamers, especially console gamers back then, were predominantly children. As such, opinions about games were heavily impacted the lives of those kids, such as myself. That meant we weren't making the purchases, and we were heavily impacted by advertising and how opinions were shaped. There was no readily available internet at that juncture, so information flow was completely different, often due to deliberately misleading marketing. As a result, kids were generally much less informed than today's gamer. Very few adults had much knowledge of games, so they weren't really a viable resource for kids to consult, and they also didn't have interest or knowledge to correct misguided notions we might have had. In fact, I used to get the occasional free rental from a local video game store because I'd give the owner, a family friend, advice and opinions on what titles to stock when he asked. That meant a ton of our opinions were shaped heavily by advertising, especially Nintendo Power, and whatever games paid to have the cover spot each month. and then distorted further by the inevitable game of telephone on school playgrounds where urban legends were perceived to practically be reality. More unbiased outlets, such as the nascent GamePro, would blow up a few years later and help to start democratize information and dispel marketing spiel, but around the release of Final Fantasy I, most places did not carry GamePro. It also meant there were tons of things we had no idea about because our parents didn't want us to know, they didn't know themselves, or because companies deliberately didn't share this info. This was an era where box art was often quite effectively misleading because sprites were blurry enough you could kind of see what you wanted to see in them. So with that information in mind, consider the following U.S. release schedule. Dragon Warrior was released in Japan on, looks like May of 1986. It came out in the U.S. in August of 1989. Then Final Fantasy came out in Japan in December of 87 and in the US in May of 90. Dragon Warrior 2 came out in Japan in January of 87, but then it came out in the US in August of 90, so basically a full year after Dragon Warrior 1. Dragon Warrior 2 comes out. Final Fantasy 2 comes out a year after Final Fantasy 1 in Japan, but does not come to the US. Dragon Warrior 3 comes out in Japan in February of 88, so basically another full year later. Comes out in the US in March of 92. Final Fantasy 3, again skipped. It came out in Japan in April of 90, but it did not come to the US. And then Dragon Warrior 4 comes out in Japan in February of 90, and then in the US in, looks like, October of 92. But then Final Fantasy IV comes out in Japan in July of 91 and comes out in the US in November of 91. So basically 2 years separate the US release of Final Fantasy I and Final Fantasy IV as far as anyone in the US is concerned. They were 1 year of change apart, whereas Dragon Warrior had slowly been trickling into the market 1 year at a time. Mm-hmm. The way this came across as a US-based player is that Dragon Warrior 1 was a revolutionary game, followed by a big leap of increased complexity in Final Fantasy 1, and then a lateral move in Dragon Warrior 2, and then a massive leap forward in Final Fantasy 2, aka Final Fantasy 4. Or, I guess, other way around. Final Fantasy 4, aka Final Fantasy 2. And then they were followed immediately by archaic releases of Dragon Warrior 3 and 4. So, because Final Fantasy 4 came out in the US as FF2 a full year or a few months before Dragon Warrior 3 or 4 came to the US, the Dragon Warrior series seemed like it was out of touch in a way that the Final Fantasy games didn't. They basically released the old ones after the large leaps forward were made by other series. Also, games like Ultima. Let's start there, and then we can go into the PC part of the argument. So what do you guys think about that explanation?
I'll respond to the PC part of the argument.
Yeah, I think that, that's pretty well in line with ground I kind of tried to cover last time we did this. But yeah, basically, in short, the series were far more in conversation and communion in a great, Japanese RPG ecumenical society in Japan at the time, whereas where they're released over here, it was more of Nintendo saw a lot of money potentially in co-marketing Dragon Warrior and never really stuck. And Final Fantasy was localized just at a time to make it seem like exponentially cooler. And then because of the Super Nintendo's launch, exponentially more with it in terms of technological advancement. Yeah, trickling out Dragon Warrior 3 and 4 as late as they were in the NES's life in the United States has always kind of surprised me, because I just never have gotten the impression they sold that well in the United States. Clearly the NES had a tail after the Super NES launched in the United States, because they wouldn't have supported it all the way through damn near the end of 94 otherwise. But again, they were fairly large games to have localized. Dragon Warrior 3 or Quest 3 and 4 are not small. So it was a considerable amount of money was spent to make those playable in the United States. And I think there's probably a good Polygon article maybe out of that story. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Basically, they spent
Like,
all
why
this
do you
time
keep
and
throwing
energy.
this at the wall? You know?
Bringing these games that at the time were outdated even in Japan, and they brought them to the U.S. into a market that was not cuckoo for JRPGs at that point, and these games were not going to convince anyone to become cuckoo for JRPGs.
I hate to be an asshole, but I think that Square lucked out, and they were the first to release in the Western audience, and that is the only reason why they had that innate nostalgia, they had that innate brand recognition, especially in the United States.
Well,
they were the first to
Final
release
Fantasy
a
I
Japanese-style role-playing game on the NES to Western audiences.
No,
but they weren't, though.
They weren't. Dragon Warrior beat them to market by a year.
And then a big marketing push, it should be said, by Nintendo, because they literally gave it away with a Nintendo Power at a point.
Yeah, like, Dragon Warrior was the first. Final Fantasy I getting that D&D style magic system, and like some of the story of Final Fantasy I compared to what was out at the time made it distinct. But then because a year later, like a year and a half later, Final Fantasy IV comes out on the Super Nintendo. Like, you haven't played Final Fantasy IV yet, but it is light years ahead of 1.
Yeah.
It looks like it's the jump is similar to like the jump from
7 to 8 or 8 to 9.
Yeah,
like 7 to 9. It like
all
more
right.
than that, actually. Significantly more.
Again, and this is going to be the second part of Slag's comment. This is all valid if you pretend that the PC didn't exist and the PC computer role-playing game community does not exist.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
I guess the other thing
part.
I would point out is, like, he's right, the point that the jump from, like, Final Fantasy I in 1990 in the United States versus 7, which came out in 97, so it's a 7-year delta, that's not that much more than the jump from something like Uncharted 1 to Uncharted 3, which I think was like a 5 or a 6-year gap. Think about, like, the gap between those two games, those two releases, and like the changes that were made. I guess they're on the same system, so this point's kind of lost, but I'm trying to think something that would actually line up.
Yeah, I mean,
but like the point is, it was like an enormous like technological like moonshot over 7 years from where they started. Whereas in Japan, it was a 10-year gap, which is like, of course, this has gotten better. This makes way more sense.
Yeah. And the jump between 1 and 4. 4 had named characters. 4 had a story. 4 had characters that grow over time. It's got multiple environment. It's like it's a huge jump, and you'll see eventually when we get to 4.
Okay,
so
but again, comparing
PC
that
part.
to Uncharted is also unfair because I feel like 90% of that argument can be dismissed by saying Moore's Law. Basically, the video game version of Moore's Law, which is low barrier, low bar.
You're not wrong.
Low bar. Yeah. Jumping from one rung to the next is way easier. All right.
Oh, shush, cat.
Sorry. And when it comes to the PC argument, as for ZP's argument about Ultima, Slag writes, games like Ultima weren't really viewed as equal competition, at least where I lived. PCs were often incredibly expensive back then by today's standards, not uncommon for an entry-level PC to be $3,000 to $4,000 in today's money, and an NES maybe $500. And in most households I knew, most PCs were viewed as educational/work tools for the whole family. It was hard to get access to them, and a lot of homes didn't even have one. Parents were often more protective of their PCs given the greater investment in them. I know in my house I had to ask permission to use the PC. I didn't have to ask to use the NES as long as I only played for 30 minutes. Even worse, Macintoshes were in their zenith around then, and that was a notoriously game-unfriendly platform. So a lot of the homes that had computers, that even had them, had ones that where the gaming options were limited. I didn't know a single kid at my school who played Ultima. I doubt that was unusual. The NES and Sega Master System/Genesis had the bulk of the interest by far. Furthermore, the PC gaming market didn't seem to advertise as heavily to kids. I saw Nintendo and Sega stuff on TV constantly, on the hugely important cartoon after-school blocks. I can't recall an Ultima or PC gaming ad on TV, but maybe they existed. I did see some in magazines, I think, but they always felt like they were targeting an older, more teenage demographic and definitely didn't have the sheer volume of presence.
Different strokes for different folks. Were PCs expensive? Well, it depends, because the whole modus operandi of Commodore, the company Commodore, was they were making the consumer-friendly entry-level PCs, and those were highly successful. The perception problem is something that PCs will always have and still suffer from, is that the PC is not a platform. It is something that also can do video games. So I won't address the whole perception of the PC market, because, look, the PC has a reputation, whatever. Same thing with consoles. I disagree largely with, like, the PC was not an affordable platform because, again, there was Intel, there was IBM. Like, the homebrew PC market was big. Hey, kitty. And then not only that, but the community. So I guess the problem in terms of accessibility is that you had your console gamers who were basically being groomed at a very young age. And this is the reason why consoles had the reputation of being a younger audience, because that your shit was in Toys R Us. Our shit was in a brick and mortar store where we also bought figurines for Warhammer 40K.
Yes. Yeah, and for a lot of people, getting a PC at all was potentially difficult. It really depends.
Nope. No.
Well, I mean, my parents did not, like, we had a PC, but it was my dad's work PC, and I could not use it for gaming for a very long time.
Also, I guess this is geography, because I lived pretty close to Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And so PCs were a big deal in the California Bay Area, like huge. Like everyone, I remember when my dad bought his first Windows NT computer, and he was really excited that it had 64 gigabytes of memory.
Yeah, I did not have that. My parents didn't even know what a PlayStation was until I told them.
But again, if you think that the PC was not an affordable platform, there were companies who made homemade computers that were affordable. If you're talking about how there was no marketing arm for the PC, it was a big deal. Like, BioWare started off making a tank desert combat game. id Software was hitting some of the biggest online focused games ever. LucasArts, the entire video game branch of Lucas, only was on the PC. Like, it's just the reason why a lot of people have a difficult time with, like, understanding or viewing those games as kind of their part and parcel membership in the gaming history, is because you either were buying your video games in Toys R Us, which none of those games were PC games, or you went to that brick and mortar comic book store that was sold figurines, and right next to the porno section were the homebrew PC games.
Yeah, and that is not a circumstance that everyone necessarily had access to. The Nintendo and Sega consoles were much more mass market at the time in the early 90s. And Sly goes into some other things. In terms of the game design, some of the things that we find now as just kind of obvious, like some of the items like ribbons and some of the equipments that we can kind of gloss over and just acquire in Final Fantasy 1. Back then, it took a lot of time and effort to figure out what the hell these items did and why you wanted them. And so there was a little bit of just sharing and passing around information with friends that would fill in some gaps and make the game more engaging. And also, D&D was not as widespread and understood back then. So for a lot of kids, this might have been a backdoor introduction to D&D that they didn't even realize was happening.
Those are fighting words right there.
Well, D&D was not as... At the time, there was the D&D moral panic happening.
Yes.
Right around here. And for some kids, their parents might not let them play D&D, but their parents wouldn't know that Final Fantasy is ripping off D&D. And so you kind of get the backdoor introduction to D&D this way, which I never knew that the Final Fantasy 1 systems were that close until I got exposed to D&D years later. And now it's like, oh wow, I can't believe that they didn't get sued for copyright infringement. So I think that's good. Thank you, Slag, for that. And I think, ZP, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I have a comment from Aaron or Alex. Shit, I said his name wrong. Gotta eat a sausage.
No, you don't.
Yep.
You don't have to.
Okay, so he also said a couple things.
Oh. Are you talking through the sausage?
Number one is Vienna Sausage Challenge is back.
Finish chewing before you read.
God.
Number two is his, it's bullet pointed, so we'll just go down this. Number two is, I was wondering whatever happened to the Final Fantasy trading card game podcast that you promised way back in Final Fantasy X.
We'll get on that. I was looking into... Yeah, you thought
about signing up for a tournament.
Yeah, I'm still looking into that. I wanted to get some more exposure to it. Unfortunately, one of my local game stores, the Final Fantasy trading card games distribution in the U.S. is hot garbage. They only have, I think, one distributor who has exclusive right to distribute it. So getting it into your store when a store does not necessarily have to use that distributor for anything else is a real tough argument to make. So the nearest place where I could play is over an hour away. Which I live near New York City. That shouldn't be the case.
One of the listed ingredients is natural flavors.
Damn it! So it's coming. We will do a Final Fantasy trading card game episode.
And the third and last.
We could probably stream some matchups, me versus you. I will destroy you.
Man, that hurts. I don't feel good. So the third and last point is, ZP for the last two podcasts has been name-dropping Final Fantasy X Will and promising to describe why it is a colossal piece of shit, but has then not followed through on talking about why Final Fantasy X Will is a colossal piece of shit. Details. All right, so I'll be quick about this. Don't worry, Gino, because I know the Final Fantasy X talk has been dominating our podcasts.
That it has.
Surreptitiously. Jeff Rud, you like the ending of Final Fantasy X. It's kind of an amazing work of art, right?
That's fine.
What if I told you that Final Fantasy X Will basically completely upends and no longer makes that ending canon?
Doesn't surprise me. I mean, look, it's been demonstrated repeatedly that this company has zero reverence for what they did with the story of Final Fantasy X, like at all. Like nothing is sacred. So
not only that, they don't seem to know why people liked it.
Yeah.
So Final Fantasy X is a weird. 10 Will is a weird thing that when you click bonus audio, it's actually the credits of the HD remaster. But as you're watching the credits, it's an audio dramatization of a story told from the perspective of, and I shit you not, Auron's daughter.
Wait, what?
So Auron had a daughter while he was a ghost.
Fuck.
Yes! Yes!
And
Tell
then
me more.
Auron's daughter, I don't know, man, wants to find Titus so as that she can find out how he came back to life because she wants to bring Auron back to life. And
does Kingdom Hearts show up?
In the middle of... He doesn't know. Surprise, surprise. Auron stays dead. Like, one of the few send-offs in Final Fantasy X that was amazing doesn't get ruined. But what does get ruined is kind of the finality of Final Fantasy X, where Yuna basically is the figurehead of bringing forth the eternal calm, and the people of... The universe of Sphera has broken its Ouroboros, its great chain of being. The circle of misery has ended.
The spiral of death, as they call it.
The spiral of death has ended. Well, turns out, last hour, Sin just suddenly reappears in the game. And they have to kill Sin again, and then it smash cuts to black.
Fuck that.
So, Auron has a daughter.
His ghost sperm brought a child into being. Is this daughter from when he was in the Dreams Anarch? Is she a dream ghost child?
It really just she presents the fact that she's Oron's daughter, and then the story immediately transitions to, oh shit, Sin is back.
Fuck.
So Sin's back. So the whole beautiful message of Yuna making this massive sacrifice to liberate the world of Sphera so as that they could basically the whole thing about like breaking away from predetermination in favor of destiny is no longer canon.
Great. Is Riku there?
Riku is still bubbly, thong showing, beach going girl.
Okay.
But they rebuilt home and the Macalania Woods has disappeared.
Great. Okay. Well, let's never talk about this ever again.
Okay. You guys, so Doctor Who is a thing that people like and was on television for like 30 or 40 goddamn years, and then it was gone for like a while because it turns out it just got really fucking bad. But during that, let's say 10 or 15 year, please don't correct me, gap, there was a bunch of like Doctor Who Gaiden spin-off shit to string people along, and a lot of that was in the form of audio dramas.
Great.
Yes.
So as you say, audio drama where a bunch of nonsense happened, I'm just like, oh yeah, like Doctor Who. Okay, same thing. Just all nonsense, just pure insanity. Great.
Yep, there were the audio dramas and then a catastrophically unfortunate made-for-television movie.
Oh my god, you have two hearts. Ah, love that movie. Anyway, so Final Fantasy 1.
Wait, what? You actually like that movie?
I like garbage. I'm a shit cult kind of guy.
Okay,
and,
as long as you recognize that made-for-television movie is garbage.
Oh, it's terrible.
It's fucking so bad.
It's so bad.
How did they?
It's so bad.
And then
it's like American
had to basically come out of nowhere and salvage that series. You know, he gets a lot of shit. Eccleston's run as the Doctor, but fucking, it was better than that goddamn movie.
Yeah.
I don't watch Doctor Who. This is gibberish to me.
We can't go down this dark road. This is kind of like when people complain about when we talk about basketball.
Speaking of which, Kristaps Porzingis, R.I.P. Kristaps' knee.
Porzingod. God rested on the seventh day, and Porzingod is going to rest for the seventh month, basically.
Yes, he'll be resting for a while. But, man. I look, I don't want to have a nerdy podcast where we talk about nerdy shit like Doctor Who. Let's talk about serious adult things like Final Fantasy 1.
Right.
So, when we last left off, Final Fantasy 1, we had just left the tutorial section after a chain of, I believe, 7 fetch quests. And we had arrived at the town of what is its name? It's like
Melmond.
We arrived in Moldavia.
Yes. We arrived at Melmond, and then we started our quest to take on the Earth Fiend, Lich.
This is, for me, when it became very apparent how sterile this game is. Yeah. It's like, got to go down the dungeons, got an arbitrary number of levels. If you get low on health, you got to go all the way back up. You pop a tent, then go back down. This is when
walk back to the town to save, because the only ways to save in the PS1 version is with a tent or in the town, and the only way to replenish your MP, your magic spells, is by resting at an inn or using a cottage. So you basically run out of magic all the time because it's early in the game.
Yep. Yeah. So this stretch here from basically the Earth Shrine through the Ice Dungeon and the Fire Dungeon is easily like the hardest part of the game.
Yeah.
The Ice Cave is like where things really get
middle
dire,
section.
But, yeah. And then after that, everything just kind of rolls into another fetch quest chain, after which you complete a couple more dungeons and then go to the last dungeon and you beat the game after you fight 4 recycled bosses. So that's what we did.
Yes. I don't know if I agree entirely, because I felt like the very last boss was punishingly hard, which we'll talk about later, but not since the likes of Mystical Ninja Goemon from the N64 have I seen a game where it front loads all of its difficulty within the first 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. Final Fantasy 1.
And then it drops hard.
Yeah. So, first, in Melmond, I think it shows you how the quests are always kind of just told to you by random NPCs if you talk to them at the right time. Melman does this even more so because once you get outside of the tutorial area, you're able to take your boat to any of the continents. You can start doing things out of sequence if you wanted to, and the only thing that tells you you're not supposed to be here is the enemies will frickin' kill you. Otherwise, you can kind of start a bunch of quest chains all at the same time if you want.
Yeah.
But so that means that each of the continents generally has whatever you need for the dungeon that is on that continent contained within it, so you don't travel that far. So on Melman, you need to go, or on that continent with the Earth Shrine, or the Earth Cave, I think it's the Terra Cave. There's also another cave where there's a golem that eats gems, so you need to get this gem for a golem, then you need to pass through, and then you go meet a wizard, and the wizard gives you some item you need to get further into the cave, and then when you get all the way to the bottom of the cave, you can finally beat the boss. Which, it's an interesting bit of non-linear game design, I think. Now, you're meant to approach this linearly anyway, because of the difficulty of the enemies, but you can move between these shrines non-linearly, which is kind of interesting.
I just think that the problem that I have with it is it's not very direct about any of its language. So when you come into a town, you almost feel obligated to talk to every person in the town because just one or two random bozos in that town will have story critical information, but they won't have the entire picture. So you have to ask another person. And there's no clear iconography in terms of which characters have critical information.
And everyone who doesn't have critical information has nothing interesting to say.
Nothing. Right. And even worse, these cities, we talked about it last podcast as a joke, but Melmond is another example of it. Knowing where to go in the city sucks.
Yeah, getting the guy who did your dungeon layout to do your city layout, bad idea. They don't make very good urban planners. Finding
the fucking, monks that are hidden in the forest to the side of the town took me forever to figure out because I was like, where the fuck are these people? I still don't know where to go. Where's this Gino says he has a canoe. Where do I actually pick the canoe up? And it's oh, you don't even talk to the guy who looks like the leader of it's just another one of the weirdos. Oh god, I hated that fucking scene.
Yeah. And there are multiple towns where there are places where you can buy magic and items and stuff, but it's you need to walk over to the left for a while, and it looks like there's nothing there, and you expect you're eventually going to get taken to the world map, but oops, there's actually two, there's magic salesmen over here. The design of the dungeons and the towns, all very poor. But I will say one of the things that jumped out at me about the towns is that every one of them has a graveyard.
Yeah.
Which I thought was very, considering how sparse each of these towns are. There's basically an inn, a church, a item shop, probably 2 magic stores, probably a weapon shop, and then a graveyard. And I thought that was interesting. Now, of course, the game does nothing with that. None of the characters really remark on that, but I thought it was an interesting bit of design to show that the world is in a bad place. By including this little element in every town.
Yeah, so created kind of a lived-in space. It answered the whole, why are there no bathrooms in Oblivion, kind of problem, where it's the world just seems sort of people just wander around in a circle outside of some buildings. But not much more than that.
Yep, not much more, but at least they thought about it. So the Earth Shrine, it sucks.
Oh my god.
It's terrible. It might be the worst of the shrines, too. It's the worst.
No. Okay, shrines, fine, because there's some bullshittery in the ice cave that I did not appreciate. But
yeah, so I think the ice cave and the Terra cave are the 2 worst for me.
Yeah. I mean, the ice cave has that weird set of stairs that boots you to the front of the dungeon, and then you have to do it all over again.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah, that fucking sucks. But on the Earth one, if you don't know where you're going, there's actually a U-bend very close to the entrance, where every step you take will force you into a battle.
Not only that, but there are so many dead ends I forget which dungeon has this, but one of the dungeons just straight up has like an O loop that you can go on in perpetuity until you figure out that you're being. This is a charade, that you are a parade of sadness. It's a factory of sadness. Like,
yes.
Whoever designed these dungeons is an asshole, is a total and complete asshole. And I think by design, part of that was done so is that you have enough levels to your characters and you get experience points doled out. But there were occasions where I would take 2 steps and a random encounter would pop off. And I felt like the progression in the dungeon had come to a crawl.
Yeah, and it just wears you down, especially if you're using the old style of magic. It's not that any of the battles is specifically difficult. It's that every single one of them will take 2 HP off of your characters, and eventually, if you're just wandering around for long enough, everyone's going to be in critical health because you'll run out of the healing items. Who thought that making the healing items have randomized healing amounts was a good idea?
Oh, it's cruel.
It's mean because...
my potion can heal anywhere from 10 to 30 health. Who would do this? Why?
And then the same logic applies to spells. Like, so, there were so many times, and then... So what determines turn order in this game? Like, there were times when I would queue up magic spells, and I needed that healing spell pretty fucking soon, and then, like, oh, shit, there's 9 ghouls. I'm going to lose my progress. Like, what determines turn order? I'm going to default to the 2 Final Fantasy experts here.
So I'm reasonably sure it's either luck or agility.
See, and I feel like the game doesn't really, like, if I wanted to level that up, in most games, I would know what attribute to hone in on or find items that increase that stat or attribute so as that I don't get put into a bind where I have 3 characters that need healing right now, and that spell has not popped off.
Yeah, and there's no... I've noticed that with the spells, sometimes my black mage will just immediately cast, and sometimes they'll be the last turn. And it doesn't seem like the spell I'm picking is the reason why that's happening. Like, if usually my characters performed actions in the same order, then I could get a sense, okay, maybe my enemies are faster than me. The only time... But it didn't. Like, my characters seemed to operate in random orders all the time. Like, my slowest... I don't even know. I don't even know who the slowest character was because it seemed like a crapshoot, like pure luck, who went when. And then the only time I noticed enemies being slow was when I could run away from them. If they were lower level than me, it seemed like I could escape fairly reliably.
And I know what the counter is like, well, when you reach a certain level, you should really prioritize fleeing from combat. Well, even then, fleeing from combat is a dice roll, because there were times where in the late dungeons, I was like up against the air elementals, and my flee command failed 4 or 5 times in a row, and it's like, well, fuck, I'm just going to kill them.
Yeah, and if you fail a flee, the thing with this game is, especially in the early game, every enemy is lethal. Every single one of them. And it's because of status effects, and the status effects being unbalanced. Almost every enemy in the early game can inflict some kind of status effect, and they range from doing nothing to killing your party. Some status effects, like poison, they're annoying, but they're fine. But then they've got a range of status effects. There's a range of them that all do the same thing. They all just kill you. Paralysis.
Like, whenever I saw, what was it, like 9 gas and whites?
Yeah.
Like, that struck fear into my bones.
Yeah.
Or when I saw the cockatrices and there were 9 cockatrices, and it's like, well, fucking, hopefully I have enough golden needles to solve this. But even then, it's like, when I need to use an item, it's like, oh, the person who I had queued up to use the item, they got petrified as well, and now everyone's petrified. I guess this is game over. I have to watch my game end.
So, for those curious, I've actually just found what I think is how turn order is determined, and I would like to actually read this verbatim because it's kind of, if this is how it works in the PS1 version, and I imagine it can't be this way for the GBA, but it might be. So the NES version was it worked on a fun little shuffle routine. So basically, take an array with 13 entries into it. The first 9 being like the potential field of enemies, and the last 4 being your party. Every turn, 2 of the entries in that array are chosen, and then they're shuffled into a different position.
What?
At random. And basically, given how that works out in terms of how things are selected on the NES, which is not very good at random number generation, it worked out most of the time. There's about a 13.8 chance that things are going to wind up just not moving at all during a battle most of the time. So
the subtitle for this game should be Final Fantasy 1 RNG, a simulation story.
Yeah. And it's very which again, like I kind of enjoy it for as a mechanical exercise more than a game in some sense, but it really breaks down when you're like, well, if I get this cast of Dia 2 off, I'm going to like get through this fight, no problem. And if I don't get this cast of Dia 2 off, I'm going to die in the 4th floor of this dungeon and get to redo all of this work. And I can't really run from this fight.
That's the argument. That's the delta between every battle just has a gigantic delta.
Yeah.
The one end of it is win. The outcome is win with no damage and your entire party is completely safe with no, like at no point were you in jeopardy, to your entire party is dead. And the difference between those two is just what turn order things decide to happen in. Yeah. What is the order of operations? It's like a terrible, terrible second grade math problem.
And the consequence of that is that for what felt like half of the game, the biggest threat to your party aren't the boss battles that the designers want you to fear or want you to feel scared of. It's these fucking random encounters.
Yeah.
Because they didn't balance the status effects. Like, I don't feel, until we got to Chaos, I didn't feel like there was a single boss battle that rivaled that of 9 gas and whites or 9 cockatrices.
Yeah. Yeah. And the status effects in this game are the follows. There's poison, which just damages you slowly, and it will also damage you on the world map. There's blind, which will decrease your accuracy slightly, but not that much. There's silence, which will stop a character from casting, which if it's used on a character that doesn't have magic, does nothing. And even characters that do have magic, generally they can hit hard enough physically, and it goes away at the end of a battle, that silence you don't have to care about all that much. There's paralysis, which will stop a character from taking any action until it is cured, and it will be cured randomly. And when the turn it is cured, they don't like suddenly get to act like in Pokemon, where you put in an entry and 50% of the time they do nothing, 50% of the time they do whatever it was they were going to do anyway. In this game, you're just paralyzed, and then when you're healed, you have to wait another full turn cycle before you can take actions again, which means you generally get healed and then get reparalyzed. There's sleep, which in other games, there's a distinction between sleep and paralysis. Like one of them, if you get physically attacked, you can start acting again, and so there's a reason why you'd want to use paralysis versus sleep. Maybe sleep is easier to hit, but they wake up quicker, whatever. In this game, there's no difference. Once you're put to sleep, you're just as paralyzed as if you were hit with paralyze. And they both just wear off randomly. And then there's stone, which is quite possibly the worst. I mean, I don't know if it's worse than paralysis because you can heal it with an item, which means that every character can heal it. I
actually think stone is worse because it carries through even after the battle.
Yeah, but I think for paralysis, only my white mages could heal it because they had Esuna. But for stone, every character was capable of healing it, which I thought mattered more. And stone also, you don't take damage while stone is happening, so you can leave a character stoned for a bit, and they won't take any damage. So it lets them survive and be in a good state when you heal them.
But all of our consternation about the status effects is kind of dancing around the issue of why it's such a big problem. You cannot save in the dungeon. The dungeons are deliberately designed to waste your fucking time, and if you die in the middle of a dungeon, you have to start all over, and you lose up to hours of progress once that happens. And so it feels incredibly unfair when I reach the second to last level of the Earth Shrine, and there are 9 whites and ghasts, and they all attack before even one of my characters is able to cast off Dia. And I have to watch 4 of my characters get inflicted with paralysis, and then I don't get to play the game anymore. I just have to watch the game end.
Yeah.
Yes, and all of this is even more frustrating because later on in the game, this will all go away.
Yeah, it's yeah.
So we'll get to it. So the Earth Shrine, or I guess it's the Terra Cave, you have to go down, you get down to the 3rd floor, and then there's a vampire there, and he's an asshole. You kill him, and then you get some gems. You need to take it to a golem. The golem then lets you through. You then get a item that will, I think it's a flute?
Yeah.
You get a flute
So you have to fucking go back to the cave
Yeah.
that you just were in, but there was just an arbitrary blockade
Yeah.
between you and fighting the Lich.
It's terrible.
Yeah. So you open that up, and then you fight Lich. You go down 2 more floors, and then you fight Lich. Lich was not hard for me.
No.
By this point,
none of the bosses are hard. Really, honestly. Even when you have to run through them, like all 4 of them in a row, like
they're not hard.
It's Gravy Train.
You get this spell called Saber by this point, and I found Saber to be game-breaking. It's a black magic spell that lets you boost a character's attack stat by 14, which is a considerable boost. Like the difference between some mid-level, like mid-tier weapons and upper-tier weapons can sometimes be 14. So if you just cast that 2 or 3 times, it stacks. And then on top of that, some characters have multiple hits, like as they get faster, and each of those hits will get that bonus. Yeah. So your character starts getting multiplicatively more damage as you use Saber, and then you also eventually, not by this point, but soon, you get Haste, which causes a character to do twice as many attacks. So if you just go Haste Saber on one of your physical attackers, you can pretty much level anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this, as a reminder, I'm playing this game, or was playing it, with 3 characters instead of 4. And every boss fight was, Saber, Haste, Black Belt just keeps hitting, use the heal items for everyone else, and eventually they just fall over. Like it trivializes 99% of the game. That is not a mob. So like most of the problems are, do I fight this mob or run from it?
99% of the time you should run.
Yes.
And the bosses, because all of the bosses are single target, almost the optimal way of fighting single target enemies is boost your physical attackers and then just use physical attacks. Mobs introduce, and multi-target enemies introduce an interesting trade-off. All of a sudden, black mages and crowd control become a consideration. But when you only have single-target enemies, the black mage spells do not do as much damage. Like the highest level ones do not do as much damage as a single physical attack.
Yeah, Flare and Holy did like pennies in comparison to a properly prepared monk or kung fu master, whatever it was called.
Yeah, and even worse, I think, like, the crowd control spells, they're kind of interesting, but each of them, some enemies have weaknesses to certain spells, and that's really the only way you get damage comparable to a physical attacker, is if you use one of those spells that an enemy has an elemental weakness to. If something has an elemental resistance, it doesn't matter what level of spell you cast, it won't do shit for damage. So it seemed like once I figured out what the right elemental spell was, I could use it to get through like 5 mobs quickly, and then after that I'd run out of spells, and all of the spells that the characters were not weak to just didn't even work as crowd control spells.
Yeah, and for anyone who's listening to this podcast, the reason why we're spending so much time talking about the mechanics is, narratively speaking, there's basically nothing to talk about. There's nothing to talk about. And I remember, Gino, you kept saying, well, you should be less negative about this game because it's going to give its story hooks later down the road, and then that never happened.
I mean, it gives some story hooks, like, at the very end, but it's like, it's nothing to slightly more than nothing.
It's barely anything. Yeah. Until the very, very, very end, where it realizes, oh shit, I'm a video game, and I guess I need to have a story, kind of, sort of.
Yes.
So, there's the Earthlink Cave. Oh, sorry.
Oh, just worth mentioning a little bit more about the magic system. Magic spells have damage ranges that are irrespective of what your character's stats are.
Exactly.
Right. which is super weird. So, like, Fire 3 does between, like, 70 damage and, like, 200. And whatever that range is, your character can be level 5 and do that, and they could be level 30 and do that much damage. So, boosting up magic users, unlike physical attackers where they get linear increases to their power, and eventually it becomes almost multiplicative. It almost becomes not algorithmic, exponential. Their
Especially
power
with
increase.
Monk.
For mages, they're at the same power level the whole time. It's just, do they get access to more uses of this same powered spell, which is super weird. It's a really weird design choice.
Yeah.
So
Earthlink Cave sucks. Icelink Cave sucks.
Yeah, so you go to the Crescent Lake after that.
Finding where that fucking lake is such a colossal pain in the ass.
Yeah,
it's
and
like,
you also...
these characters would say, "Oh, hey, you should go to the fucking Crescent Lake." And it's like, where the fuck is that? Where do I go?
You said you found the world map, and it was a hidden secret?
A Easter egg. Because the people who made this game are fuckers!
Yeah, I think I blew your mind, and I was like, bro, there's a map in the game. You just gotta hit this stupid button combination, because when you went into Matoya's cave, you talked to a broom, and the broom was like, like Led Zeppelin record backwards speak that just said, like, hold B and select, which is stupid.
Oh, wow, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, surprise, there's an in-game map, and you hold B and select, and it just pops right up. Or in our case, circle and select.
So there's really not a lot to talk about in terms of, like, the story.
No.
So when do you guys think that the game, basically, the difficulty drops off like a hot bag of dog shit? Like, when did you really realize that, like, now it's not a matter of if I can beat the game, it's a matter of when?
Yeah. For me, it's the point where, so a lot of guides and a lot of, like, the recommended course of action to do is to, like, do the Terra Cave, then do Mount Golg, the lava cavern thing, and then do the Ice Cave last out of those three. And I tend to do the Ice Cave between those, just because I like getting to that airship first, because basically the reward for completing the Ice Cave is an airship. Because maybe my primary beef with this game is getting around sucks, and an airship solves a lot of that.
Ship
for a
sucks.
While. Yeah. It solves some of your problems for a while, but eventually
the game parking the airship is suck.
Yeah, it sucks. But I figure once I get that airship, it's like kind of trivial to like, if I need to pop on another level, I fly over to the Peninsula of Power and just slap another level on and just get it over with.
And then also, if money's not a problem, you can just immediately go to Onrak or the fucking Fairy Town and just buy the high level spells that you need, or the healing magic that you need, or Asuna, just like that.
So yeah, for me, it's like about the time I finish the ice level and get through like maybe my first like halfway completed run of the lava, the volcano Mount Golg. That's the point where I'm like, all right, now let's just get this done. Let's bang it out. Because I think it was Gino made the observation, but these dungeons are not as long as you think.
No.
They make up for it by doing Final Fantasy 2, Phantasy Star 2 level of y'all ever heard the phrase you have piss straighter lines in the snow than this? Like, basically there's not a straight line in a single one of these dungeons.
Yeah.
And that's how they basically make them feel long, when in actuality, if you have some idea of where you're going, it's actually trivial. Like 50 paces you can get through like a floor of a dungeon in some cases. Like,
yeah, that is exactly my experience.
So
once I looked up some maps, I got through most of these dungeons in like 10, 20 minutes, other than, random battles and weird luck bullshit.
Yeah.
And I would say for me, the moment this game became trivial, again, I echo the airship. Once you get the class change, that helps too. But really the moment when I stopped having to care was when I got ribbons. Once I got my first ribbon. So ribbon is this... It's a piece of equipment that in Final Fantasy 1 and forward, it basically makes you immune to all status effects. And it also makes you immune to... I think it also reduced magic or elemental damage as well by like 50%. It does a lot of stuff. It looks like it's weaker than most helmets, but it is not. because of all of the incidental stuff it does. And once I had a ribbon on either a black mage or white mage, like whichever character I just didn't want to get insta-killed, it became a joke. Because I just gave that ribbon, I think, to my knight at first, and then my knight was immune to all of the negative status effects. And because my knight had good armor, most mobs couldn't even hurt him. He dealt like 1 damage per attack. So at that point, my knight could just run through all of my enemies like a knife through butter, and I would eventually kill them all.
And it's also one of the few equipable defensive items that doesn't drop the stats for the monk.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it also can be equipped on every character class, so there's no reason not to equip it to everyone you can. It's the best piece of defensive equipment in the game, and the game gives you 3 just on like the main path.
And as it worked out, if you're playing with 3 characters, that's perfect. So.
Yeah, and even if you're playing with 4 characters, you can give 3 of them to everything except like 1 character, and then that character who's left over, you just give them whatever their like knights have shields and armor and stuff that will protect them from 90% of the
There
stuff.
are also equipable items that you can use that can allow you to use magic spells, which kind of blew my fucking mind. Because there was a weird item that allowed me to use Saber on characters.
Right. That and the Invis 2, the white robe that you get late in the game, are like the point where the game is like, all right, this is just completely broken now. Again, balance.
So, I would agree with what you guys are saying. Like after I was done with the Crystal of Fire, I felt like, oh, hey, I can really start running away from these random encounters because there's nothing here for me to really get. But I didn't because I'm a champion, and so let's talk about how. Actually, no.
Mount Gold
is fun.
I should say, ZombiePie, the other thing about your version that you're playing compared to ours is when you fight and beat things in the Dawn of Souls version, they occasionally drop stuff. Like
RNG was really low though for me. I was
the RNG for the original version is 0 because no enemy drops anything at all. There's no drops, 0. So there's like even less of an incentive to fight.
So this kind of leads me to one of the few moments of the game that I honestly liked. I really liked the trials. I thought that was one of the few times in which the lore and mythos of Final Fantasy I kind of tied into the mechanical progression of the game. Because when you're in that level, it feels like a trial. It feels like the design of the dungeon actually is justifiable. And the reward there is pretty significant. I mean, your characters have a class change, and I quite enjoyed the trials. I'm not sure how both of you felt about it, but I felt like that was one of the few set pieces that I actually enjoyed.
Yeah, I liked the trials. I liked the teleporter puzzle. I liked getting the rat's tail. Should I go over like some of the Final Fantasy references that are tied into 9? I did that in part 1 a little bit.
You did that in the Final Fantasy 9 podcast.
Yeah, so 9, some of the stuff that gets echoed from 1 in 9. Mount Gullug from 9 is just the fire dungeon from this one. The dwarves, we said the dwarves.
Scottish accents.
And then the rat tail that you need to give to Bahamut. That is also in 9. So, and all of the elemental fiends show up in 9 again. So, and Garland shows up in 9.
Right.
Sure.
Which I enjoyed getting the rat tail, and then it was kind of annoying finding which of the holes in the ground had Bahamut in it.
Yeah, what is it? Ceradine Cardia Islands. That's when I realized it's like, oh, fuck, I can't just park the airship on whatever terrain. I have to find a plane to land it on.
Yep, that's super annoying. And running into these holes, because, of course, dragons live in holes.
Yeah.
Of course. Historically.
And Bahamut, you talk to him once, and he's like, way to go, and now your characters are better. And the class change does not see, at least for the monks, it just gives you some better stat increases as you level up, but otherwise they behave exactly the same.
Yeah,
Paladins.
That's the one thing I would say is that for some of the character classes, it opens up new avenues of gameplay, like when the warrior or the knight is now able to cast magic, but his options there are so limited to where you don't feel like you need to use it because he's going to be stuck using level 1 through 3 spells. So it's like, well, these spells have no fucking purpose. Yeah. It's kind of another sign that they thought this would be a cool thing, but really the only thing you get out of it are higher stats and a different character model.
Yeah, it's kind of they looked at something like how you would what they're not called multi-classing. There's a specific word for like early multi-classing in like first and second edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. But the idea that's like, oh yeah, I'm a warrior, but I can also cast like some certain wizard spells. Like that's really neat.
But
yeah.
But let me tell you, man, when the white mage got exit and the black mage got teleport,
yep,
that's when this game got fun. Not really fun.
Or if you're playing Final Fantasy, the Origins version, you get Warp and Warp 2.
Yeah.
Teleport and exit. No, Warp and Warp 2. And then... yeah, you can actually leave dungeons, though luckily they put a teleporter at the end of all the 4 Fiends dungeons, so you can just teleport directly out, which is nice.
It's a nice
Thankful.
Yes.
I, like, the last moment I felt difficulty in this game was the Ice Cave. I ran into some stupid wizards that cast Fire 3 on me.
Yeah, I kept hitting that mob as I was running out the door.
Yeah, I was running out the door. I killed the boss very easily. That stupid giant eye. It took like 2 hits and it was dead. And then I ran into this trash mob that went Fire 3, Fire 3, Fire 3, and then my whole team was dead.
So the really only big set piece that I feel like is worth talking about is Gaia, because the fucking quest there sucks ass.
Yeah.
Like
Which one is that? The water or
that's the ferry and then the water level.
Okay, yeah, that one sucks.
Fucking... would it have killed them to have a texture for the fucking caravan? Because I was rolling wads of shit. I felt like it. Trying to find out, well, what corner of this fucking desert has the bottle for the ferry that will give me the oxygen that allows me to go into a submarine to save the mermaids from the Kraken?
God, that sentence is terrible.
Yeah. In this trifling-ass simple dungeon that, man, if I could just walk in here, it'd be nice.
Yeah, and then in the end, the water temple is like one of the easiest or simplest, like most straightforward temples in the fucking game.
Yep.
It's bare bones, but they kind of realize, oh shit, there are no dead ends here. We might as well make it this horrible quest so as that you can just get in there.
Yeah, it's something. So I actually had some dim memory in my head of like there's a fucking weird little lobe of the like all the parts of this game that were flags here in the second half that we're covering. I kind of muscle memoried my way through all of them except for the chimes that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So this didn't catch me that much at all. It was just it remains a pain in the ass to do. So it's like, just let me go in the sub.
Fucking fuck.
Yeah, the chimes are great.
Oh god, it's just fucking like, just let me finish the game. Like they realize, this is something we constantly talk about. I don't think there's been a single goddamn puzzle in a Final Fantasy game we've played on this podcast that I've enjoyed. I don't know. Like we could do a ranking of Final Fantasy puzzles, and it would all be like, kind of the Ultimisia painting puzzle on top, and then everything else is a trash fire.
Yeah, well, good news is Final Fantasy 13 kind of has no puzzles, so, you know. It's also a good game. So.
No, it's not. But that's fine. But that's fine. We just played a not good game, so it's okay. So the water dungeon itself is not that hard, except for that stupid... The water dungeon's weird because you start on the 3rd floor, or like the middle floor, and then you need to go up and then down. You go up to get...
you have to revisit during the Temple of Chaos, which I did not appreciate.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you can get some good items on the top of the water dungeon, and then you go to the bottom. There is a floor that just scrolls infinitely, and you need to figure out where the hell the stairs are, and realize that the infinite scrolling... If you just have a map of the level, it's very simple. If you don't, you can wander around forever and die very easily.
Yep.
Which is really good design. Well done. Kraken and Merilith, those two bosses. Merilith did, I think, like no damage to my characters and died immediately. The fire boss. Kraken, I think, barely damaged anyone and died immediately. Both trivial. Then you get to the air dungeon. This one sucked for me. I hated the air dungeon.
I hate the design of the air dungeon because everything is spread the fuck out.
Yeah.
And like that first floor where it's just a bunch of pillars that force you into like specific pathways, and it's kind of like what you said. It's like you have to go up, then down, then up again, and then down again.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I hated more was getting to the air dungeon because there's this village where no one speaks English. They speak some weird language, and the way to figure out how to speak to them, you need to get a Rosetta Stone.
Which is in a different location, then bring it to someone who's not even in that town, Dr. Uni, and then he will give you the ability to understand their language.
Yep, Dr. Une's mirror, I think, is... I think that might be something...
And
that's in 9, but I don't think it's from him. But that doctor, that fucking doctor... Finding him again was annoying.
Oh, yeah.
And then...
Off in a shitty corner.
Yeah, and then finding which of the people in the Lunarian village or whatever that village was who had the key item you need.
Yeah.
You have to talk to everyone, and there's no indication of which one of them will give you the item.
Yep.
And you have no reason to ever go back to that town because all it has is a level 8 and level 8 white magic and black magic place. So there's also no inn, there's no item shop, there's nothing. There's fucking nothing.
Yeah. And it's also one of the few villages you need to park far away from and walk to, so there's no way to save once you get there. Yep. And even better, those stupid black mage and white mage places, those stores, are off on the side.
All the way to the side. And then let's be honest, they have Flare and Full Life. Full Life is critical, but Flare, by this point of the game, like using magic offensively is...
Stupid.
Yeah, especially if it's a one-target-only spell.
Yeah, and it's also the whole Peninsula of Power thing. The reason the Peninsula of Power exists is because it basically sticks into the Lunethia's like spawn area on the map. So you're just facing mobs you've already fought like dozens of times on the Peninsula of Power. So they're kind of trivial like every other fight at this point. So it's awesome. I love it. It's my favorite.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah,
in especially like floors 1 through 3, and this is just me personally, I actually had a really hard time discerning where doors were because they blended into the environment. Sure. And like the yellow doors on the like bronze looking walls, I had a very difficult time telling where the doors were.
Yep.
And then the fucking flying fortress. Oh my god!
400 years ago, Tiamat came and he defeated the Lunarians or whatever, and then he took their flying fortress.
All right, let's talk about my least favorite floor in a dungeon ever, and that's floor 4 of the Flying Dungeon.
Okay, give me just a second. I want to. Oh,
what is?
It's just the scrolling one. Like?
It's the infinite scrolling one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sucks too. There was an infinite scrolling one in the water one too, or just in the air one? And I mixed it up.
The water one's just kind of a little trick.
It's a trick to unlock a treasure chest so as that you can get a special treasure chest. But I will tell you,
the one with the Rosetta Stone,
if you don't do the math for this immediately, you're going to have a bad time on the 4th level of the Flying Fortress.
Yep, and if you do, it's trivial.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the 5th floor, I decided to do the stupidest thing I've ever done in a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah, I tried to warn them, guys.
What'd you do?
By this time, I was level 50 plus, and I thought, hey, man, I heard that there's a super boss that's notoriously difficult, but I have all these levels and hit points. Like, by the time I finished the game, by the time I got to this point of the game, my knight had 999 HP. So I decided... fuck it, I'm going to try and hunt down Death War Machine, whatever he's called. And that's when I realized that this is not a video game. This is RNG, a simulation story.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, again, I'm sad that I had to look some of this up, but some of this I remembered from when I first played this. But like, okay, so again, areas basically have a table of 64 possible random encounters when you're in an area. In the NES version of this game, it would actually iterate through that table, and it would cull entries as it iterated through it. So let's say you want to fight the war mech. You get to the 5th floor of the Flying Fortress, you go onto the bridge, and you just wander back and forth. And eventually, you will fight a maximum of 64 fights, but the war mech will happen in one of those 64. Maybe the 64th, maybe the 1st, but it's going to happen in there. From the Wonder Swan forward, they actually introduced like genuine kind of a random array,
fuckers.
like a tier through. So there's no guarantee you will fight the war mech in 64 battles. It is a genuine random encounter thing. Now, on top of that, the war mech is capable of dropping, I forget the name of the armor, but it's some really hot shit armor that isn't in the PS1 version or the NES version because they don't drop anything. It's got, I looked it up, and it's a 1 in 1,280 chance to drop this armor.
That's stupid.
Factor in that it's like RNG that this fight happens anyway, and factor in that it's random chance that this armor is going to drop. I think actually the total number is it's a 1 in 1,280 that it will drop. I don't think it's the probability of it dropping. I think it's the combined probabilities of getting the fight and the armor dropping. So I think I misspoke. But it's
still
fun.
bad.
So yeah, you wandered around and did that like an idiot. And how long did it take?
2 days. It took me about 48 hours.
Jesus.
How was the
Then
fight?
again,
Was it
I
everything
was
you
only
dreamt it
playing
would be?
the game like 3-4 hours a day, like after work. But even then, about 48 hours, like over the span of 2 days.
Was the fight everything you dreamt it would be?
No, actually, because I was so over-leveled, and like I said, I don't run from my fights. I fight them because I'm a fucking champion. I don't ever use flee.
Oh, man.
Even when it's goblins. I fight. I finish what I am a champion.
Those 12 gil, man. You're not going to make it without them.
I finish my plate.
And then I eat the plate.
No, yeah, Death Machine was a disappointment.
Sure.
Yeah,
if you're
Nuke is
overleveled
a
for Death Machine.
fucker. Oh my god, Nuke, the attack Nuke, like especially in the Dawn of Souls version, is a real fucker. But other than that, no.
Yeah, I think he's the only item or enemy in the game with Nuke. Like Chaos doesn't have Nuke. So,
Chaos has Nuke.
Chaos
Chaos definitely has Nuke, because I'm going to tell you about my experience with Chaos. I told Gino about my experience with Chaos. So, yeah, Tiamat is a pushover. Basically, super easy pushover.
Again, every one of the bosses up to Chaos is, like, trivial and kind of crazy.
I like the design of them. Really nice designs. But, yeah, you're right. They should have been sued. They should have had their pantsuit off. And then fucking the plot twist happens, and it's really very boilerplate. It turns out that time travel, because this is Final Fantasy, but like the first one, so this is the reason why fucking Final Fantasy VIII is what it is.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed. They do the twist. You go into the cave. It turns out the first boss you fought, Garland, he is the source of all of the badness in the rest of the world. And it turns out the bats that were flying around him are really Lunarians or whatever, the people who you need to learn how to talk to them with a Rosetta Stone. So when you talked to the bats before, you couldn't understand them because you didn't have the Rosetta Stone. But now you can talk to them, and they tell you that thousands of years ago, Garland, or Chaos, this force named Chaos, created these 4 fiends and sent them into the future to destroy everything and to create a time paradox by sending power from the future into the past to keep Garland alive forever. And it's a time paradox because you kill Garland, and Garland doesn't want to die, so he makes a deal with Chaos He makes a deal with the devil to stay alive, and it creates a horrible time paradox.
Stop.
And then you go back in time to the chaos, the same temple that you start in, and then in there you go up to the top floor and then down to the bottom floor, and then you fight in the basements. You fight all of the same bosses you fought before again, but now they're slightly stronger. And then you kill them again.
Not that hard.
They're still not that hard. You kill them all, and then you fight Chaos, and he's either impossible or not hard at all, depending on what he decides to do.
So, was he impossible, or was he not hard at all for you, Gino?
Not hard at all for me. I lost to Kraken once, and that was frustrating. Kraken decided to use, like, a physical attack on the wrong character, and that, like, sometimes he'll use Thunder 2 and do nothing to anyone because they all had ribbons, or he'll use a physical attack that hits, like, 9 times and kills someone instantly.
Right. So Jeff, was Chaos not that hard, or was he very difficult for you?
You know, so I've actually spent the last couple of minutes looking this up, and he apparently does have Nuke, even in the NES version of it. So my mistake. The thing is, he iterates through a very predictable chain of spells. And as far as I can see, Nuke's not one he necessarily casts a whole lot of the time.
I will tell you that is false.
Yeah, it's you. So you got, like, proper screwed. I don't know how else to put it.
So,
but yeah, I got lucky, basically.
You got lucky, so you two got lucky, right? Okay.
Yeah, RNG just smiled on me.
Yes.
The RNG gods were nice. They were very nice. So opening move was Nuke,
Man,
followed by Tsunami, followed by Tornado, followed by Nuke.
Bad. That's bad.
Yeah.
And then Chaos can punch characters in the face real hard. And for someone like a black mage, that is enough to kill him in one hit.
Yep.
Yeah, Nuke, Tsunami, Tornado, Nuke. Those are the opening, and then Punch. Those are the first 5 moves that Chaos did. And
at level 50, that was still enough to wipe you?
Yeah. Yes.
So I was level 25. For me, Chaos did like Thunder 2, Tornado, like Thunder 2, and then I think he did a physical attack targeting my most physically armored character.
If you lose to Chaos, that's a real bummer, man.
Yeah, you need to redo the whole final dungeon.
Because you got to do it all over again. And also,
he didn't heal himself.
He can
against
heal
me either.
himself, and he uses Kuragaga. Hey, I pronounced it wrong, so it's time to eat another sausage.
No.
But no, yeah, he can full heal himself. That's a fucking bad thing.
Yeah, he didn't heal himself against me. For me, he just used some weak attacks. I was able to set up a monk and a knight with saber, like maxed out saber and haste, and then I just had my white mage constantly boosting everyone's defense, and then he wasn't able to really hurt me because all of his elemental attacks are stopped by the ribbon, and he couldn't hit most of my characters with his physical attacks anymore, and then he didn't use nuke or heal himself.
And then Ding Dong, the witch is dead, and the epilogue is, I guess, nice, but fucking whatever.
Yeah, I wrote down this line from the epilogue, because the epilogue says, like, oh, you did a great job, the cycle of torment has been broken, the spiral of death has been broken, Garland has been defeated, Chaos has been defeated, way to go. And then it says, the crystal gleams within your heart, too, for you are the one who fought the battle that spans 2,000 years. They're talking to me. I played the game.
Aww.
I'm the one.
All right, so let's rank this fucker.
Yep, let's put it on the list. So right now, our grand listing of Final Fantasies
I think this is going to be quick.
With the greatest Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy IX. Yeah. Or should I start from the bottom or the top? Start from the top?
Let's start from the top, but then when we rank Final Fantasy 1, let's start at the bottom.
It is followed by the second greatest Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy X. Then Final Fantasy VII. Then Final Fantasy VIII. Then Final Fantasy X-2. Then Mobius Final Fantasy. And then in dead last, Final Fantasy II, the last mission.
All right, is it better or worse than the last mission? It's better.
It's better than the last mission.
Is it better than Mobius Final Fantasy?
Maybe.
Yep.
Yeah, it is.
I think it is.
Mobius.
It's actually...
Is it better than Final Fantasy X-2?
So I think yes.
I don't know.
Final Fantasy 1 doesn't ruin an entire franchise.
It doesn't, but I feel like I enjoyed the active... Actually, no, there's that whole section where you just need to watch comm spheres, and that never happens in Final Fantasy 1.
And there's also, like, the hedonism and, like, sexism.
Yeah, that never happens in Final Fantasy 1.
The problematic elements of 10 too.
Those don't happen. At no point did I have to frame a chocobo eater for a crime in Final Fantasy 1. I didn't have to play Sphere Break.
Is there a true ending versus not true ending?
No, there's just the ending where I learned that I was the hero all along.
It's better than Final Fantasy X-2.
Yeah.
Okay, I can allow that.
Okay, so do you think it's better than Final Fantasy VIII?
No. No, not close.
No.
Not even close.
It's and I'm
You don't like it.
I may be like the greatest defender of this game of the three of us, but nah, dude.
Is there a concert scene? No,
Nope.
There's not.
No. There's a dance though. Just
The
kidding.
music, I feel like we haven't talked about it much, but the music in this game holds up. Like, there are some bangers in this game.
And even if it's a blatant plagiarism of D&D, the character sprites are cool.
Sure. I guess my only complaint about the music is I wish he could flip over to the Famicom soundtrack on the Origins release.
Dude, I am with you because I've always felt like the audio quality for the GBA is dog shit. So I actually did a weird thing where I was playing the YouTube OSTs while I was running the game mute.
Yeah. So
that Famicom music is good.
So when Dragon Quest came out in Japan, they released these symphonic arrangements of the Dragon Quest soundtrack onto cassette tape. And people were encouraged to basically play the Famicom game with the symphonic renditions of the music playing.
Okay. That's awesome.
Playing it. Yeah, and they're very good. Like that music holds up like 100%. There's not really a similar thing for this, but I kind of wish there was.
But in the end, it provides a nice little template, and it's good as a historical curiosity. But the moment that you look at this game, even in comparison to what came out at the time, it doesn't really hold up.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, I liked 1. I think that one of the nice things is speedrunning 1 or playing 1 quickly. Not that hard.
Oh, yeah, we should say as a benefit or in the pro column is it's short.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, modular. You can have some fun with it. You can do weird shit like play with 3 characters or play the game solo as a white mage, or like you can choose your own adventure to an extent. So if that is appealing to you, it's worth checking out. The mobile version is probably a totally fine way to play this game at this point in time, though it's not giving you the Vancian experience that was described by our
And if you have grindfather tendencies, I think you would agree, Jeff Rud, it's a pretty good grindfathery game.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, it is the prototype. It is one of the prototypes for that kind of game.
It's the John Cena.
Yes.
The John Cena of RPGs.
Well, actually,
So I think-
when John Cena was a rookie, he was called the prototype.
I'm aware.
Gino isn't.
It's fine. He's the Marine. Okay. Whatever. Who cares?
So, Gino, last words?
That's it. I think that's it. Final Fantasy 1, I'm glad I was able to revisit it. I hadn't played it in a very long time, and the music holds up. Some of the designs, now that I know more about D&D, it's interesting to put this better into context. It's kind of a miracle that this game spawned one of the most successful video game franchises ever.
Agreed.
It's amazing. I'm glad that everyone learned their lessons, but not in time for Final Fantasy 2.
No.
Hey, Jeff Rud.
Hey.
If we ever record a podcast about Final Fantasy 2, doors open for your third guest spot.
Yeah. I've played Oblivion, so I feel like I've played enough Final Fantasy 2 to talk about it.
I love Oblivion. I will defend that game.
Yeah.
That's what Final Fantasy 2 systems seem like. Do you want to punch your own character in the face enough so that your strength, defense, and health will go higher? Because that's the best way to grind?
But we're not going to be playing Final Fantasy 2 anytime soon because,
No.
Gino, you have we're in our Suicide Blood Pact to play Final Fantasy 13. Fuck me. Why? Oh, God.
Yeah, so my guess is that
We'll
we
have
haven't
a new
scheduled...
announcement when we get closer to the endurance run.
Yeah, we haven't scheduled everything for the community endurance run, but I assume that this will probably start on the Saturday of the endurance run, would be my guess, because usually Friday we do some sort of more produced, more Unprofessional Fridays-esque thing, some sort of game show thing on Friday to jump straight in, and then the endurance runs all begin. And my particular endurance runs tend to start on Saturday and last the whole day.
Oh, God.
And I hate 13 so much.
Oh, man.
I hate it so much. 13 was one of the only Final Fantasy games where I enlisted a friend in my dorm. He was looking, I was playing it, and I was like, oh yeah, Final Fantasy 13. He's like, oh, that looks really cool. I'm like, oh, you want to play? He's like, sure. And then I let him play, and I left because I wanted him to make progress for me. And then from then on, I would just ask him, hey, you want to play more Final Fantasy 13? Like I was doing him a favor. But he was just making progress for me, so I didn't have to play. And now we're going to have to play all of it. We'll have to figure out who's playing and who's commentating.
So,
or how this is going to work.
Hot take. Final Fantasy 13 is good until you get to Grand Pulse, and then it becomes not so good.
Wait,
I've heard people say the
that's
opposite,
the inverse.
where like the first part is bad and then it gets better at Grand Pulse. So
man.
we're going in this like super. I don't even know.
Yeah, go ahead and comment all you want, people. But I will hold this belief. I will take it with me and hold it in my heart.
Well,
isn't it great that there are so many people who want to convince us that, hey, man, the franchise gets really good when you get to Lightning Returns? It's like, great. It took them 3 fucking games to finally figure out their shit.
Yeah, I won't apologize for them dicking around making 3 of these games, and they could have probably produced a lot better, but I was shocked how much I enjoyed that game up until I got to Grand Pulse.
I was shocked by how little I understood about what was happening in that game.
Oh, yeah.
LCL!
You mispronounced that.
Oh, shit. Gotta eat a fucking Vienna sausage.
Boy! Thanks for having me on, Gino.
All right, thank you both. And if you want to convince us that Final Fantasy 13 is actually better at Grand Pulse or vice versa, do so at Deep Listens Pod or at That Pinguino on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com, our comment sections, or deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Those screams of pain are ZP. Jeff, if people want to find you, how can they do so?
At Electric Viking on Twitter, at Jeff Rud on the Giant Bomb forums. Add me on that Xbox. I'm awesome Van Art there. I may be picking up Monster Hunter World on that platform soon because I've got some friends who are Xbox owners, and that seems like a fun game people like.
And with that, thank you everyone for listening. The soul still burns. Until next time.
Salute.
Peace.